Hello, this is Hiram Makinik. Father Joseph, I think, will probably be jumping on later. He's taking care of some things. Um, so, this is Orthodox Apologetics, Monday, February 11th, new style, or January 29th on the old church calendar. I still have a bit of a cough that I'm trying to recover from. All right. Since Father Joseph isn't here, I'm going to go through some of the questions and subjects people have raised on the Orthodox Apologetics War Room. If you have not joined the Orthodox Apologetics War Room /War Zone on Facebook and you're interested, I highly recommend it. This whole attempt at a program is derived from trying to do with Orthodox apologetics questions on that forum. All right. Someone on the War Room asked, I know what I believe about this, but I seek other perspectives. They say, why do we still consider RC, that's Roman Catholicism, and its offshoots Christian? Have they not adopted enough heresy to be considered just heretics? Why do we still need Rome to have an ecumenical council, or do we? Well, technically, the Orthodox Christian position, technically, is that there are no Christians outside the church, which is the Orthodox Church. If you are not Orthodox Christian, then I don't think you're even called a Christian in any official church document ever. To call non-Orthodox people Christians is at best a courtesy, because we just don't want to call them pagans. But they should more properly be termed heterodox or heretics, which are ultimately interchangeable. Although heretics to some people sounds, I guess, more negative, although it has the same essential meaning as a heterodox person, as calling them heterodox. I mean, I know that they have etymologically, you could break it down differently and such. So no, we would not really and have they not adopted enough heresies to be just considered heretics? Yes, any Roman papists, so-called Latins, Roman Catholics are heretics. Hey there, Father.
Hi.
We're broadcasting.
Yes. Hi. How's it going?
All right. This is Father Joseph talking. He's talking now. Okay, good. There was someone had asked a question on the War Room about why do we still consider RCs and their offshoots Christians? Have they not adopted enough heresy to be considered just heretics? Why do we still?
They're Christians in a formal sense.
Well, what I was saying is that technically, in the strict definition of the church, you have to be a Christian to be a member of the church.
Right. But I'm saying in terms of terminology that's usually used.
Yes. Oh, yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. In the strict sense, they would not. No one outside of Orthodox is considered Christian, but in a, you might say, kind of a more wide. I'm not sure if you said you used the word formal sense. Or individual Orthodox figures and saints have, for example, Metropolitan Philaret of Moscow or Metropolitan Saint Philaret of New York, and others would have termed them heterodox Christians or something like that.
Yeah.
Because they did still believe, I guess, in the Trinity or something, I suppose. But we do still consider all of them to be heterodox or heretics.
Yeah.
We don't need Rome to have an ecumenical council. I don't. This view is not entertained by the Orthodox Church. So okay. So there was another interesting thing that happened recently was that Pope Francis, the head, speaking of the so-called Roman Catholics, met with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. I guess it's
the Grand Mufti.
Yeah, it says Grand Imam Al-Azhar Ahmad Al-Tayyib in Abu Dhabi. And they signed this document. I posted it on the War Zone, and the document is basically kind of like ecumenical fraternity of all religions. There's no
Lumigantium.
Exactly. Yes. So I'm not sure how there have been attempts for some Roman Catholics to defend it by saying, for example, Pope Francis says in the document, he says that the pluralism and diversity of religions, color, sex, race, and languages are willed by God and his wisdom through which he created human beings. This divine wisdom is the source from which the right to freedom of belief and the freedom to be different derives. Well, there's a problem here, is that God did not will there and did not make them there to be different religions on the earth. He gave the one true religion, which is what we call orthodoxy today, and all the other religions or deviations from that are not willed by God. So the Holy Trinity does not will false religions. Our Lord said in, I think it was John 14, he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes into the Father but through me." So, and the Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians 6:15, "And what concord hath Christ with Belial, or what part hath the believer that he that believeth with an infidel?" So stand, and anyway, and in this is, I think we talked a little bit about a related subject a few days ago, Father, where someone said, would it be better to be a sedevacanist or to be a part of the official Roman Catholic Church? And the answer is neither. Ultimately, no, it would not be.
It's pick your poison, basically.
Exactly. I mean, like you said, we're looking at the inevitability, the logical conclusion, the wrap up of papism at this moment.
Basically,
it's come full circle, and I remember this is what J.J. Overbeck said back in the 1870s. He said that what's going to happen when there's a pope who comes and he declares Hinduism or Mohammedanism to be equal to Christianity.
Well, St. John of Kronstadt also said that basically the papacy was like an empty shell just waiting to collapse on itself.
Yes, and this is what's happening. Yep, absolutely. Let me see if we have any other subject matters to talk about. I'm looking through the wardroom. Still nothing back on the whole Diamond Brothers fiasco.
Oh, no, I'm writing a third letter.
Okay.
Let me get to a third letter because it seems like they have not written us since. So we will just go into our sent folder. And we'll just, attention, Brother Diamond, Peter Diamond, take 2. So we will. Okay, let's see.
Okay, so.
Hold on. So if we're going to. Give me 1 second.
All right.
And I'm going to just.
This is the third letter, that email you're writing.
Yeah. I'm trying to hold on.
Because I remember on the War Room, a number of people were saying, "Why don't you try to debate them? Why don't you?" In fact, I
remember that. And
I remember it something like 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago.
I had
people asking me, "Oh, you should go debate the Diamonds. They'll debate anybody."
Yeah.
And I guess it turns out, no, they won't. So.
Yeah. Brother Peter, so here we are on our third attempt.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, we can at least respond with a no this time.
I also had another question sent to me. Let me try to find it before I read some of the questions that are on the forum. Okay. So a man named Alexi on Facebook sometimes shows up in the comments here as a friend of mine on Facebook. He lives in Brazil, sent me a comment, and the question was that if a soldier kills himself in order to avoid being raped, eaten alive, or even humiliated, would this be a sin? And the answer is yes. Suicide to avoid humiliation or to avoid torture would still be considered a sin. St. Augustine, in fact, deals with this in the City of God, I think the first book or so of the City of God, where he talks about how there were people who were committing suicide in order to be avoided capture by the pagans, lest they be enslaved. And the church still did not consider that to be acceptable. So I would advise a number of people who are interested in such questions and how St. Augustine deals with them to read the first book of the City of God. Okay, so Mickey Mick says, Atomic Lead says, always fun to talk about Pope Francis. Mickey Mick says, Pope Francis is essentially a Hindu. He believes all religions are true. Well, he'd be the Western equivalent of a Hindu, which would be like kind of Masonic theism. To be honest, though, let me be frank. I'm not sure Pope Francis believes in anything. I'm not sure if giving him that much credit that I'm not sure if he's not somebody who just doesn't believe, is an atheist. I don't know. I mean, saying that he has this well thought out, system, even like some kind of Hindu philosophy. I mean, that's evil as it is. I don't even think he cares that much. Atomic Lead says, someone defended it as referring to God's permissive will only rather than willing it positively. Well, I mean, I don't know. Are there anywhere in Scripture where God says something like, you know, I will it so people will blaspheme me, or I will that, you know,
Not to my knowledge.
not to, you know, okay. Ramble 777 says, can Catholics, Protestants, and Oriental Orthodox Christians be saved, or are they damned to hell? What about the Catholic and Oriental Orthodox saints for miracles? Are their miracles false? The teaching of the church is that there is no salvation outside the Orthodox Church. If any of those people are saved, the only way they can be saved is if they become Orthodox Christians. Now there are various accounts in the lives of the saints, like in the earliest life of Saint Gregory the Great, something called the Whitby life, since it comes from England around the year 700 or so. There is the famous account where St. Gregory prays in the Emperor Trajan's soul is delivered from hell. Now, how did that happen? I have no idea. God can, of course, do those things. But by the very fact that the Emperor Trajan is delivered from hell, he becomes a true believer. But I wouldn't bet my salvation on being delivered from, you know, the pit of damnation. Now, Metropolitan, I think St. Philaret wrote kind of a little article called Will the Heterodox Be Saved? And he says that, you know, God can find a way to save them, but again, when he finds a way to save them, it's making part of the church and making them believe. So how does he do that? The moment before their death, I mean, that's all speculation, you know, but I would not go into I'm afraid to say anything more because people are going to use that as a justification to say, well, we don't really have to worry about converting people then. But no, the teaching of the church is there is no salvation inside the church. And to try to say, well, maybe somebody can be saved outside the body of Christ and without the grace of God, that's impossible. What about a Catholic and Oriental Orthodox saints who perform miracles? Well, what about the Hindu saints or the Buddhist so-called saints who perform miracles, or the Shinto magicians? Look at Pharaoh's magicians. They were able to perform. They were able to, up to a certain point, they were able to imitate the miracles that God performed through Moses. Now, at a certain point, they weren't able to do certain things and then the magicians said, "This is the finger of God." So their performance and many of the things they attribute as, for example, miracles. For example, there's that one Roman Catholic figure, Bernadette, whatever, the one who claimed to have the vision of the Immaculate Conception or something like that. And people go to her body in France, and it looks like she's entirely perfectly preserved. Well, and I've had this thrown at me by a Roman Catholic saying, "Well, look at They were trying to compare Saint John Maximovich to Bernadette, and saying, "Look at Bernadette, perfectly immaculate in her appearance." Now, well, it turns out that you're not looking at Bernadette; you're looking at a wax mask made of her face before she died, that they put over her desiccated face. And same thing for her hands. All right. So,
well, it's worth noting that, I mean, incorruptibility is not something that is I've heard of not even non-Christians who were found incorrupt, but and that may well be due to, it may be a result of an ascetic lifestyle of, I heard of an 18th century gunslinger who was found incorrupt, but it's possible he was eating nothing but locusts because there was no food out there. I mean, we just don't know the theoreticals there.
There are multiple things for it. And you remember, of course, there's the famous account, I think it's of, in Brothers Karamazov, where,
Karamazov,
where Father Zosimus, who is in fact a holy figure, he's based off several elders in real life.
Right, and as soon as the people start to,
he dies and his body begins to corrupt, and everybody again begins to say, "Oh, he was a fraud. He wasn't really holy." But that's in fact the opposite. And the purpose of it, Dostoevsky writing that was to show that not all, and this is what he had been taught by several Russian elders, was that just incorruption or non-incorruption, you shouldn't use that as a telltale sign that someone's is really holy or not. So. Other factors have to go. Female Mildred says, "Have you ever heard of Pope Michael?" I see the guy up in Canada.
That's the one in Kansas who lives with his mom. And
okay. I thought there are multiple. There's also the one guy in Spain too.
He died. Yeah, no, he has a succession.
Yeah, they have very successors. Yes, Palma de Troya and all the rest. No, I've not heard. I think someone told me about there was a Pope Michael, but I didn't. I guess he lives in Kansas. Okay. No, I've not heard much about him. Let me see. Okay, Gregory Thema. Okay, says atomically says they are not even proper monks by any standard. Gregory Thaumaturgus says tell the diamonds that they are called to give an answer to everyone asking about their faith.
They know that. They're just choosing not to answer. It's
Ramble 777 says wasn't there a person in Second Maccabees who killed himself to avoid shame? Bring that up for me real quick if you could. Mickey Mouse says Pope Modernism. Mickey Mike, I'm sorry, Mick. When the Caitlyn Jenner person, when you see Caitlyn Jenner for the first time, says, have you ever heard of
Dankintarianism? No.
No, you're going to have to tell us about that.
Yeah, just, let us know. That sounds interesting.
Here, can you read the other questions while I look up the reference in Second Maccabees?
Sure. Do the fathers interpret the Pharaoh's magicians as doing actual magic rather than just illusions? That's a good question.
I think some of them do say they did tricks, and some say they had demonic powers.
Yeah, I was going to say it wasn't one or the other, because it could have been both, to be quite frank. But as I understand, the fathers have heard both, so I don't know that there's an official teaching on that specifically. Mickey Nick says, fathers that come from a Muslim family and want to convert, would it be considered a sin if I hide my Christian faith from my parents until I'm economically secure and independent? Under your circumstances, no. I don't think it would be, because it's a tough one, because it's not like there'll just be division in the house. It depends on you have to assess your own risk. That's what it really comes down to. If you're like concerned that you're going to get I don't know, killed or something, then I certainly wouldn't do that. But again, I don't know your situation, but I would say that it wouldn't be considered a sin in that situation especially if it was extreme.
But the problem is they're going to be asking them to do something like Islamic prayers and things like that.
Well, you'd be surprised at how lax parents can get.
Okay.
It just depends.
Okay, so 2 Maccabees 14:37-46 says, now there was accused unto Nicanor one Razis, one of the elders of Jerusalem, a lover of his countrymen and a man of very good report, I think I remember this, who for his kindness was called a father of the Jews. From the former times when they mingled not themselves with the Gentiles, he had been accused of Judaism, and did boldly jeopardize his body and life with all vehemency for the religion of the Jews. So Nicanor, willing to declare the hate that he bare unto the Jews, St. Augustine, I think, deals exactly with this question, sent above 500 men of war to take him. For he thought by taking him to do the Jews much hurt. Now when the multitude would have taken the tower and violently broken into the outer door, and bade that the fire should be brought to burn it, he being ready to be taken on every side, fell upon his sword, choosing rather to die manfully than to come into the hands of the wicked, and to be abused otherwise than beseemed his noble birth. But missing his stroke through haste, the multitude also rushing within the doors, he ran boldly up to the wall, and cast himself down manfully among the thickest of them. But they quickly giving back, space being made, he fell down to the midst of the void place. Nevertheless, while there was yet breath within him, being inflamed with anger, he rose up, and though his blood gushed out like spots of water, and his wounds were grievous, yet he ran through the midst of the throng, standing upon a steep rock. And when as his blood was now quite gone, he plucked out his bowels, and taking them in both hands, he cast them upon the throng, calling upon the Lord of life and the Spirit to restore him. Those again he thus died. Okay. Now let me find out what the patristic quotes commentary was this, but the ancient Christian commentary. I have that in my library, like 2 stories down, but I don't really want to walk all the way down there at the moment because I'm on the computer. Commentary, Maccabees. Okay. Again, I think St. Augustine deals with this in City of God, Book 1, now that I think about it. Commentary, Maccabees. This is the Apocrypha version. Okay. All right, are you there, Father? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, can you take over? I'm going to go get the my copy of the Ancient Christian Commentary from the patristic commentary on this verse from downstairs real quick. Okay.
Okay, sure.
Okay, back in like 30 seconds.
Okay, so what would be a good apologetic for the defense of the Deuterocanonical or apocryphal books? The best defense is ultimately that they are part of the church's received text, the LXX. That's the text that is used in the New Testament. One can make the argument that the apocryphal books, if you want to call them that, the Deuterocanon, are not used, but that runs into problems when you're dealing with books like Judith and Esther, because of the fact that those books have Deuterocanon in them. However, they are still considered canonical books in the Hebrew canon. There are other references within the scriptures that indicate that the apostles were aware of the Deuterocanon. Certainly, the point is the church used it and considered it canon. So that is what it comes down to, is that if you're claiming to be the apostolic church, you would use the scriptures that the apostles used. You would not use the 8th century Masoretic text.
Okay, I'm back.
You're back?
Yeah. Okay, there's no light. The light bulbs. Nothing's working in the library. I'm going to have to get back to people tomorrow on this question.
Okay. All right. And then let's see. When you see Caitlin Jenner says, "In Dankantarianism, the dank is a way of life, something within us all, ready to manifest itself. That which isn't dank is a sin. The dank communicates to us through memes. Pepe is one of the top two. Is this more of that meme magic religion? I'm just wondering, because I think that people, I get that a lot of it is mostly a joke. But what do you call it? It's I think some people take it seriously. I'm not saying that you do, but I think that there are people who really get into they start really believing it, because when you don't have something solid to believe, you just kind of grab onto whatever kind of works, and that's unfortunate. But that's what it is. I hate to say that, but that's virtually every new religion on the planet starts that way.
What's the Dankatarianism? I missed out on this.
Oh, we got to read it. Yeah, I already read it, so you can read it. Apparently, he's a little concerned that I read it out loud.
What was wrong about reading it out loud? Wasn't it typed up?
No, it's right here on the chat.
Oh, okay.
But Judith isn't canon for the. I could have sworn that Judith was canon.
No, they're not. No, they don't accept the Book of Judith.
Okay, I was not aware of that. Esther, they do though.
Now I recall. I'm trying to find in the City of God where I think, as I recall, Saint Augustine says that they praise his courage. They praise Rizias's courage. They don't. But they're saying Rizias's courage, and they're not necessarily praising what he actually did. So, hold on. Suicide chapters, the City of God. All right, we'll continue. I'll put something together for talking about this tomorrow.
Well, that's on Wednesday.
Or Wednesday. I'm sorry. What would be a good apologetic for? Did you talk about the defense of the Deuterocanonical and apocryphal?
Yeah, I said basically that. From my perspective at least, and you may have a different one of this, but the best defense for it is the fact that it is within the scriptures the apostles themselves used.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, the Septuagint.
And so the point is, they consider it part of the Jewish canon. It wasn't until later that it was changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is the clearest demonstration that the pre-schism popes didn't believe in a Gregory VII, Pius IX view of the papacy? Well, the biggest ones are, the claims that they made after the schism. For example, the idea of popes deposing an emperor. That was absolutely unknown. It was bizarre when it first came out. There were, they didn't have the view of the papacy in almost every sense. If you look at any quote defending the papacy from the pre-schism popes, there's almost always a qualifier for a reason that they're doing what they're doing, and it's not ever I appeal to myself. That never happens. It's not ever, it's never I appeal to my right as Peter or anything like that. It's almost invisible, and that's the thing that that's probably the trickiest part, and why I always say read context, because if you don't read context, what happens is you assume that a misquote is a quote. And so In any case, let me see here. What else we've got here? Luther didn't remove the Apocrypha. He just moved them to a different section. Well, they weren't Apocrypha. They were the Deuterocanon. I believe he referred to them as Apocrypha. That's they became considered.
Well, he also got rid of the book of. Remember, he removed the Epistle of James to an
he
appendix.
removed and Revelation, if I remember. Hold on, because let me just see, because the Luther Bible. If you give me 1 second,
Because technically, the Lutherans didn't even accept Luther's conclusions on these things.
I'm just taking a quick look here because.
Okay, so City of God, 1 chapter 17.
Because Luther's translation, he put the biblical the Deuterocanon between the Old and New Testaments, and so then basically in the 1534 Bible they were given the well-known title Apocrypha. These books are not held equal to the Scriptures, but are useful and good to read. Yeah, no, I know that even in the King James version they originally had the Deuterocanon as well. So the point is that unfortunately, what happens is once you start saying something is not absolutely necessary, then people start taking it out. That's just a given. It's economics, because ultimately, paper costs money. So that's once you start saying something's not worth the same amount as something else, that's basically what happens. How did Augustine reconcile absolute divine simplicity with the theophanies? Father Enoch does. He's done a bit of reading on St. Augustine, and I'm not sure. I don't know that. Does St. Augustine hold absolute divine simplicity as it's understood?
Well, again, I ask, what do you mean? What is absolute divine simplicity? Is there something called relative divine simplicity? See, this is my point. When people say, I'm not trying to be funny or whatever here, but when they say absolute divine simplicity, does anybody, who was the first one to use the term absolute divine simplicity? Because I know St. Gregory Palamas says God is genuinely simple. All right. Now, there's probably a difference between, what you mean by absolute divine simplicity. I think they mean that there is no such thing as a distinction in essence and energies in God. I think that's what they mean. So, I don't know. I'll have to look it up. Okay.
Divine simplicity.
What's it?
It seems to have really come into, I guess you could say, more of a...
The reason I'm reticent about saying anything is because a number of standard works will say St. Augustine did not believe in a different distinction in the Godhead between operation and essence. All right? But I myself would have to, in fact, study all the passages of St. Augustine to look at their authenticity, to see what is he saying. Is there any comparable?
He's saying
the reason anyway, but I'm just saying that I'm reticent to give an answer because oftentimes people are trying to set up traps when they're trying to attack St. Augustine.
Well, the problem is he says the Roman Catholic understanding of absolute divine simplicity, but that was really developed with Thomism, not with St. Augustine. So that's something to keep in mind. Related to my previous question, what is the Orthodox understanding of Pope St. Gregory the Great and his clash in the issue of a universal and ecumenical bishop? Says he claims to have annulled some act of Constantinople or something to that effect in the same document. Well, what that's referring to is Canon 28. And the point is, Canon 28 is when Constantinople was moved ahead in rank over Alexandria and Antioch.
Well, can you? I'm sorry, atomically, can you give us this letter you're talking about specifically? Like, can you link it to us or something? I'm sorry, Father Joseph, continue.
Yeah, but the point is, no, St. Gregory absolutely despised the concept of a universal bishop because he thought it degraded all the other bishops. But the motivation for rejection of Canon 28 was along the exact same lines, because it was about a rejection of the idea that the honor that the other Petrine sees had would be lost. And so when it gets presented out of context, that like by itself, and it's just said, well, obviously he's referring to his own authority here. It's not. He's referring to the authority of tradition. And the point is, popes did feel, St. Leo did, St. Gregory did, and a couple of other ones did up until basically the 11th century after the schism, when they just tried to take over Alexandria and Antioch and Constantinople anyway. then basically they had respect for the original, I guess you could say, setup that was present in Nicaea.
And I should also mention if you read pravoslavy.ru, which is the Russian variant of orthochristian.com, there's an article on there that actually attacks, that says Saint Gregory was right to say the ecumenical patriarchate shouldn't be called ecumenical. I mean,
one of the things,
and what they're saying is that because Constantinople should no longer have the first place in the diptychs because its place was predicated upon it being the capital of the empire.
Right, and that's the problem, that ecumenical was referring to the ecumenate, was referring to the empire. So once that's gone, I mean, I get the argument. I don't know that I want to take anyone's title away. I mean, not that
not that he has any legitimate claim to it, but in the abstract, we're talking about.
Right, in the abstract. So, okay, and let me think here. Let's see here. Are there any other questions?
I think we're fine. I'll have to get back to everybody on the question about Second Maccabees.
Okay.
Because I'm pretty sure the church has never gone around and said it's all right to commit suicide if you're about to be captured or something like that. Because even if I'm going off of hand, the morality that was the allowance of certain things in the Old Testament, which is during the period of the Book of Maccabees, there were things allowed in the Old Testament that we would not allow now under more perfect Christian morality. For example, it was acceptable under certain circumstances to basically execute all of your enemies, or to for a man to have 5 or 6 wives like King David or King Solomon, but that would not be acceptable now. So right off the hand, I'm inclined to say that what's happening in Maccabees is simply an example of a pre-Christian morality of the Jews, which would not necessarily be transferable to any period in the Old Testament, into the New Testament. So, Mildred says, on the offense here for a second, what would be a good apologetic for arguing against Calvinism in its ontology and general theology? What do we say to that, Father?
Well, I mean, I've been discussing with Calvinists now for a few weeks, and I thought it was interesting because I thought to myself, if we take the base arguments of Calvinism, so I went to the wiki just for the heck of it, and the first thing that struck me was it said Reformed theologians believe that God communicates of himself to people through the Word of God. People are not able to know anything about God except through this self-revelation. I found that actually seemed to be quite the case, in the fact that it seemed like God was distant, and in discussing the church being alive and miracles being alive and things like that happening today, seemed lost on it, which is why I kept bringing it up. But the point is, that I think is probably the Achilles heel of Calvinism. I mean, I don't, without being rude about it, their God's almost basically dead. He doesn't do anything except what's in the book, and that's all. And so everything's reduced to a formula.
Well, that could explain also why, Calvinist churches, I guess they reflect their theology there. Traditionally Calvinist churches they didn't even allow a cross as a sign. The allowing of a cross in Reformed churches is basically a 19th century or early 20th century influence. So they didn't allow any religious symbols whatsoever. They were so iconoclastic. So, and that makes sense. If God does not really, in fact, reach you in any other way except for the Bible, but then the Bible is conceived as almost a kind of a distant text, which is just left on earth, and then everybody has to kind of interpret it. And supposedly the Calvinists are the only ones who have the correct interpretation of it.
Well, now the tulip thing, the problem with that is, again, you're correct about total depravity being, in a sense, a contradiction of perseverance of the saints. What a Calvinist would probably respond simply is that the elect basically would be rescued from total depravity to some degree, because they have to be, they're saved by grace. But the point is I think that the problem with that is that, again, there's implicit assumptions. And one of these being, of course, the assurance of salvation. And when the problem is that one can use the terminology of assurance of salvation, but only in the sense that God has the knowledge of who is assured of salvation. We don't. And this is something that is kind of lost on people because they tend to think that, salvation is something that you can just say, it's a formula. Just, you believe, you got it. There you go.
Well, they believe there's no free will, and you're simply you're one of the small, tiny portion of the elect predestined from all eternity. God, at a certain point after your birth, presumably, chooses to elect and send grace, regenerates you, and that's it. Essentially, from what I understand, essentially is their proposition, right?
Yeah. That's a good question. If one is totally depraved in his nature and his nature is static, how can they be preserved? They would probably say that since nothing's done worthy of them. I'm not a Calvinist, so I don't want to argue for them. But I assume it would be something to the end of that sort of preservation would be through Christ, not through any actions of their own. What would be the best church fathers to start with? The ones you read, no. But no, the best church fathers, I mean, in my opinion, to start with, it depends. I always say start with the lives of the saints, and then work your way through. Like, if you're looking to work into apologetics, work through Saint Hilary, work through Saint John of Damascus. Especially their expository books where they're explaining things. So that's usually the best way to go.
I'm trying to look up some answers to some of the questions, but my computer is slow. Epistle, letter 206 of St. Augustine. Let me see. 204.
I should also add, while you're looking that up, using the biblical commentaries of St. Augustine and St. John Chrysostom are also really helpful, because that can help complement your scriptural reading, so that you're not like just reading massive amounts of specific fathers. And maiden Calvinist, yeah, well, that's probably because they don't want to think it that far ahead. And so that's unfortunately that you have to come to those conclusions, otherwise there's a problem.
See, I'm trying to see St. Augustine. I found a book that talks about, this is what reminded me of St. Augustine addressing the issue in 2 Maccabees. And I'm sorry. And he seems to have addressed it in Epistle 204. Well, it turns out the Erdmans doesn't translate Epistle 204 for some reason. So it puts me in a bad situation here where I'm going to have to find some, see, Augustine, Fathers of the Church, letters. Okay, so there's letters 1 to 29, 203, see 204 to 270. Okay, so that's the Fathers of the Church, volume 5. I'm looking up letter 204. Okay. Sorry, my dogs. Okay, are you there, Father?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry to give the dead air, but my computer is slow.
On both sides.
Okay.
So, but anyway, no worries. Everyone loves the doggos. So.
Okay. All right, looking up letter 204. Stop, dogs. Okay. All right. So this is 204. Where's the reference to it? Okay, section 6 and 7. Okay. The reason I'm cautious about this is because I'm afraid people are going to try to use something like what you find in Maccabees to say, well, it's acceptable to do suicide at some point. If, that's just not what's being said. That's not what the church teaches. Okay. Okay, so Epistle 206. 204. St. Augustine, here's what that has. He says, in the matter of the frenzied deaths which some of them inflict on themselves, which commonly make them hateful and horrible even to many of their whose minds have not been seized by this madness, we have often answered them according to the Scripture in Christian reasoning, as it is written, he that is evil to himself, to whom is he good? And I think St. Augustine is quoting Ecclesiastes 14:5 there. St. Augustine then says, at least let him who thinks it advantageous and allowable to kill himself, kill his neighbor also, since the Scripture says, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. But when no laws or lawful authorities give command, it is not lawful to kill another, even if he wishes and asks for it and has no longer the strength to live, as is clearly proved by the Scripture in the book of Kings, where King David ordered the slayer of King Saul to be put to death, although he said that he had been importuned by the wounded and half-dead king to kill him with one blow, and to free his soul, struggling with the fetters of the body, and longing to be released from those torments. Therefore, since everyone who kills a man without any authorization of lawful power is a murderer, anyone who kills himself Therefore, since everyone who kills a man without any authorization of lawful power is a murderer, anyone who kills himself will not be a murderer if he is not a man. I have said all this in many ways in many other sermons and letters of mine, but I must admit I do not recall ever having answered the objection based on the incident of Razias, that's in 2 Maccabees 14, one of the ancients. Embarrassed by the extreme scarcity of examples, after having at one time and another delved into all the authorities of the church, they boast of having found this person in the book of Maccabees, as if it were a precedent for the crime of self-destruction. However, let this argument suffice for your charity, and for prudent men generally to refute them. If they are ready to apply to the life of Christians the examples of all the deeds of the Jewish people, taken from their writings, let them apply this one too. But if there are in their books numerous exploits of men who are truthfully praised in their writings, which are either not appropriate to this time, or were not right even when done at that time, this is indeed such a one which Erasius committed against himself, since he was in high esteem among his own, and was most zealous in the Jewish religion, which the apostle says is but loss and dung in comparison with the Christian justice. And since for this reason this same Razias was called the father of the Jews, what wonder if an overweening pride found its way, so to speak, into the man, so that he chose to die by his own hand rather than suffer the indignity of slavery at the hands of an enemy, after having enjoyed such eminence in the sight of his countrymen. Deeds like that are usually praised in pagan literature. But although the man himself is praised in these books of Maccabees, his deed is merely related, not praised, and it is set before our eyes as something to be judged rather than imitated. Not, of course, to be judged by our judgment, but by the judgment of temperate doctrine, which is conspicuous also in those ancient books. Obviously, Razias was far from those words which we read, take all that shall be brought upon thee, and in thy sorrow endure, and in thy humiliation have patience. Ecclesiastes 2:4. Therefore, he was not a man of wisdom for choosing death, but of impatience in not bearing humiliation. It is written that he chose to die nobly and manfully, but was it necessarily prudently? Nobly, of course, that he might not become a captive and lose the liberty of his rank, but manfully because he had such strength of mind on which he relied in order to destroy himself. When he could not accomplish this with the sword, he threw himself headlong from the wall, and being still alive, he ran to a steep rock, and there, almost bloodless, grasping his bowels with both hands, he cast them upon the people, and thereupon sank down exhausted and died. These are great deeds, but not necessarily good ones. For not everything which is great is good, since there are also great evils. God said, the innocent and just person thou shalt not put to death. If then he was not innocent and just, why is he proposed for our imitation? But if he was innocent and just, why is the slayer of the innocent and just, that is, of this same Razias, thought thereupon to be worthy of praise? This will have to be enough for the present to fill up my letter. I do not want to be garrulous, but I owe this kind of ministry of the charity to the people of Thamargadi. And then he goes on. So I don't know if that helps anybody answer the question, Father Joseph, but that's St. Augustine's answer at that point. So.
Okay, now, hold on. Okay, I'm looking here at St. Gregory T. Eusebius of Thessalonica, or Bicus of Dyrrhachium, Andrew of Nicopolis. I guess it would be book 9, letter 68 in the Register, where basically it talks about, be it known that your fraternity, that John, formerly Bishop of the city of Constantinople, against God and against the peace of the Church, to the contempt and injury of all priests, exceeded the bounds of modesty and of his own measure, and unlawfully usurped and synod the proud and pestiferous title of ecumenical, that is to say, universal. When our predecessor Pelagius of blessed memory became aware of this, he annulled by a fully valid censure all the proceedings of that same synod, except what therein had been done in the cause of Gregory, Bishop of Antioch, of venerable memory, taking him to task with the most severe rebuke, and warning him to abstain from that new and temerarious name of superstition, even so as to forbid his deacon to go in procession with him, unless he should amend so great a wickedness. And we, adhering in all respects to the zeal of his rectitude, observe his ordinances under the protection of God irrefragably, since it is fitting that we should walk without stumbling along the straight way of his predecessor, whom the tribunal of the eternal judge awaits for rendering an account of the same place of government. In this matter, lest we should seem to omit anything that pertains to the peace of the Church, we once and again address the same most holy John by letter, bidding him relinquish that name of pride, and incline with the elation of his heart to the humility which our Master and Lord has taught us. And having found that he paid no regard, we have not desisted in our desire of concord from addressing the like admonitions to our most blessed brother and fellow priest Kyriacus, his successor. But since it is the case, as we see now that the end of this world is near at hand, that the enemy of the human race has appeared as harbingers, so as to have as his precursors through the title of pride the very priests who ought to have opposed him by living well and humbly, I exhort and entreat that not one of you ever accept this name, that not one consent by it, that not one write it, that not one admit it wherever it had been written, or add a subscription to it. But as becomes ministers of Almighty God, that he each keep himself from this kind of poisoned infection, and give no place to the cunning liar and wait, since this thing is being done to the injury and rendering asunder of the whole Church, and as we have said, to the condemning of all of you. For if, as one supposes, is universal bishop, it remains that you are not bishops. Further, it has come to our knowledge that your fraternity has been convened to Constantinople. And although our most pious emperor allows nothing unlawful to be done there, yet lest perverse men, taking occasion of your assembly, should seek opportunity of cajoling you in favoring this name of superstition, or should think of holding a synod about some other matter, with the view of introducing it therein by cunning contrivances, though without the authority and consent of the apostolic see, nothing that might be passed would have any force. Nevertheless, before Almighty God, I conjure and warn you that the assent of none of you be obtained by any blandishments, any bribes, any threats whatsoever. But having regard to the eternal judgment, acquit yourselves salubriously and unanimously in opposition to wrongful aims, and, supported by pastoral consistency and apostolic authority, keep out the robber and the wolf that would rush in, and give him no way that rages to the tearing of the Church asunder. Nor allow through any cajolery a synod to be held on this subject, which indeed would not be a legitimate one, nor be called a synod. We also at the same time admonish you that if haply nothing should be done with mention of this preposterous name, but a synod be by any chance assembled on another matter, you be in all respects cautious, circumspect, watchful, and careful, lest anything should be therein decreed against any place or person prejudicially or unlawfully or in opposition to the canons. But if any question arises to be treated with advantage, let the question in hand take such a form that it may not upset any ancient ordinances. Wherefore we once more admonish you before God and saints that you observe all these things with the utmost attention, with the entire bent of your minds. For if anyone, as we do not believe will be the case, should disregard in any part this present writing, let him know that he is segregated from the peace of the blessed Peter, the Prince of the Apostles. Let then your fraternity so act that when the shepherd of shepherds comes in judgment, you may not be found guilty with respect to the place of government which you have received. So the point is that, again, this is talking a great deal about the legality of the term. And so it should be noted that the confusion that stemmed with Saint Gregory was that he was concerned that a bishop was declaring himself universal over the entire church, but that was never actually their intention. But unfortunately, he still spoke rather forcefully of the matter. But he does, he appeals to the actions of his predecessors, and he appeals to the canons of the church. which, in that sense, we're not, had already, from the perspective of the popes, not been followed since Canon 28 of Constantinople, but they were going even further than before.
Okay. Someone says,
what is an argument against the notion of a Roman Catholic St. Patrick?
And for the notion of an Eastern Orthodox St. Patrick, or the true St. Patrick. Well, it was, I don't know, 600 years before the Great Schism. St. Patrick, I'm very confused. It's like saying, what's the argument for a Orthodox St. John Chrysostom?
Yeah, the whole point is St. Patrick followed the fast, which the Roman Catholics don't now, which means that on his own feast day, he would not have been eating corned beef and cabbage. That's the point.
The argument for an Orthodox St. Patrick is the same argument for an Orthodox, St. John Chrysostom, or an Orthodox,
Orthodox St. Gregory the Great,
or Orthodox St. Hilary, or Orthodox St. Carol of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
There was no Roman Catholicism in the 4th or the 5th century.
Yeah.
Okay, Atomic Lee says, I'm pretty sure that's the letter. Okay, that's the letter. Someone asked about a Discord server. I have no idea what it is.
A Discord server is a server that's usually used by gamers. I don't know that there's Discord servers for things besides gaming. I'm sure there might be. I've seen Discord servers before, but I guess setting one up, I don't know haven't done that yet.
Do we really need to set one up? I don't think so, do we?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I guess it's decentralized, and it's not under the control of Google or Facebook, so that's a plus. But
Mickey Mix says, is having the term Orthodox in the title the only reason nominal OO? I guess it means Oriental Orthodox.
Yeah.
Nominal OO a lot of times mistakenly think they're the same as the Eastern. Well, here's the problem: Oriental Orthodox. Oriental just means Eastern. So
I
think it was the British who invented this term, the British Anglicans who invented this term Oriental, or something like that, because it doesn't make much sense to say there's a different the Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox. If you were to say, what's the Spanish word for East, Father Joseph?
For East,
like West, what, North, South,
Este.
East.
It would be Este.
Okay, so how would you? Okay, all right. Well, anyway, so I'm just saying, like, if you were to say, like, in Latin,
you could say Oriente, but
yeah, you could say Oriente. All right, so it would not be much of a difference. It's kind of like a name they invented to give to the Monophysites, so they could call them Orthodox. But I guess in the ecumenical discussions, the Orthodox wouldn't be afraid or upset. So I think it's pretty stupid. But that's just my opinion.
Well, it has muddied the waters quite a bit by accepting the terminology. But
yes.
In any case,
Sebastian Lopez says, how would you respond to the accusation, I think, that the essence energy distinction is pantheism because the uncreated energies exist eternally alongside the essence? Okay, how is that pantheism? It would have to be pantheism. You'd have to say the uncreated energies are creation. To make it an accusation of pantheism is the idea that the material universe is God by nature.
Everything is God.
Exactly. That's like Hinduism or something like that. Yeah. So
that's not it. Yeah, one can even say that the Holy Spirit is everywhere present and filling all things, but that does not mean that He is everything.
Yes, just because God is present everywhere.
There's a distinction God between the creator. There's still a distinction between the creator and the created.
Yes, God is transcendent, but also God is immanent, without Him being the creation itself. So, again, I don't quite follow how the accusation follows that essence energy leads to pantheism. Okay,
well,
so
I think it's a straw man setup to make the argument for total transcendence.
I feel there's some complex. If A is B, B is C, et cetera, 17-point argument that they're trying to make. But to me,
the problem is once you take apart one part of that argument, the whole thing falls like a.
Yes. I've been in multiple Discord servers for theology. Someone says, Sebastian says, "Okay, thank you. I asked because some Messianic Calvinist Jew has accused."
I wouldn't be against starting a Discord.
Okay, but what I'm interested in, Sebastian, is how does the essence energy? What is their exact argument that how essence energy distinction makes pantheism true? I'm trying to figure that out. What is their actual argument? Just simply saying I read it somewhere or I saw some Diamond Brothers video. I mean, I don't see how that's actual evidence. You'd have to find somewhere in St. Gregory of Palamas or St. Maximus the Confessor where they say something like the material universe is made God by nature, by per se or something. No, none of them ever say anything like that. I can tell you that. Even when you have people like St. Maximus of Turin, who's the Bishop of Turin in the 400s in Italy, who says that God became man so that man might become God. But he's not saying man becomes God per se. But by per se, I mean he becomes God by nature, or if you know what I mean by nature, by essence. All right, man takes part in God's grace. He has union with God by his energies, his operations. All right. So, but I don't see how that is a controversial thing that man can have, because if man can't have union, any kind of union with God, if we're not sons of God by adoption, then what are we? If God can't interact with the physical universe, how did he create anything to begin with?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I just don't. To me, all these attempts seem to be very, very strange. They seem to.
I think it's that they're so detached from the simplicity of the argument, because it's the operations of. It's funny if you use the word operations a lot of the times. The very people attacking the energies will be like, "Oh, that makes sense," because you're not using the word energies.
One person said they don't like to hear the word energy because it makes God sound like a nuclear power plant or something like that.
Well, that's too bad. Anyway, Mickey.
But energy. In fact, I think energia is the Greek version of the Latin operatio. So they just mean the doings, the workings, the activity of God.
Mickey Mick writes, "There's an Orthodox Discord server that I once joined. They're very modern. But they have a homosexual copped as a moderator. I left after a month. I would have left after 5 minutes finding that out." Let's see. Okay. Anthony Cabal says, "What is the origin of hesychasm? When was it adopted as a Christian practice? And how does it differentiate from the Kabbalah?"
Okay, so when they define hesychasm, you just mean the Jesus prayer?
Yeah, if you're saying the Jesus prayer, that was defined, by the monks of the desert.
Yeah, the Desert Fathers. If you read the concept of saying prayers and repeating them over and over again, you find that in the Desert Fathers, John Cashin.
Yeah.
I mean,
it goes back really far. We would say even that tradition goes back to the beginning. But the point is,
oftentimes when people say hesychasm, they mean that some kind of specific, distinct technique of sitting in a chair, putting your head on your chin on your chest.
Yeah, but the problem with that is it shows a very poor reading of the hesychastic text. Because St. Gregory used these things as examples. The hesychasts didn't always just sit there staring, say, for example, at their navels. That was just an example. They could have been staring at the rope. They could have been staring at their fingers. The whole point is that they had to continually say the Jesus prayer in their heart.
And part of the point was the staring. Well, they weren't really supposed to be fixing on an object. They were supposed to not be concentrating on anything material.
Exactly. They're supposed to just literally be focusing on the prayer itself. And so how does that differentiate from the Kabbalah? Well, the Kabbalah is... Kabbalah, it's bizarre. There's no comparison. Saying the prayer of the publican over and over and addressing it to our Lord is not in any way. There's no tree there's no Sephiroth. There's no tree of life. There's no massive things that happen when you say the Jesus prayer, except that you become better. That's it. It's not. It's just not. It's been compared.
There's no magical amulets that we can curse people with.
The problem is that people get, they hear about the Jesus prayer and they try to fit it into their own mystical trash. And so, I'm sure that
the same thing happens
where somebody made that comparison, but it would be an ignorant comparison.
In fact, the same thing happens, Father Joseph, with people who talk about Celtic Christianity, the ancient Celtic church, and in the modern mind in the 20th century, they somehow conjured up images of people worshiping out in nature.
Oh, wait. Hold on. Father, the Atomic Lead says one of the arguments is that hesychasm talks about light and Kabbalah has an infinite light, therefore essence energies distinction is Kabbalism. And Anthony said, yeah, that's what I meant. Okay, well, first off, I don't understand how Kabbalah understands infinite light. I'm quite sure it's not how we think about light or how Hezekiahs think about light. And I certainly wouldn't say that the essence energies distinction is Kabbalism, because you can find it in the early church fathers when they talk about the operations. And you can find it in St. Maximus. It predates Kabbalism.
The Epistle of John says God is light. So simply saying God is light, there can obviously...
Kabbalism in the New Testament. There it is.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. No one would say, well, obviously the Kabbalistic text, or anywhere in the Fathers you read about the divine light or the eternal light.
Well, the creed, God of God, light of light.
Yeah, light of light, exactly. I mean, or for example, the concept of saying, well, emanation is, well, the problem with that is, look at St. Gregory, St. Dionysius the Areopagite. He talks about, different, emanations of God. Now this he doesn't talk about it in some sort of Kabbalistic sense. I mean, there's obviously a way in which someone can use terminology that's heretical in a way that it's not heretical. And for Roman Catholics to suddenly decide they don't like St. Dionysius the Areopagite because he's not the real writer, well, let's be frank. You look at Thomas Aquinas or any of the scholastics, technically they didn't understand him correctly, but they still accounted Dionysius the Areopagitic corpus to actually be authoritative in some sense. All right? So it's just like these modern Roman Catholic apologists who are like, well, we got to throw out Dionysius. He can't be accurate. Then you got to throw out Aquinas, even though he's wrong. And then they don't even address Maximus the Confessor. All right? Because all this stuff goes back to Maximus, goes back not before Maximus the Confessor.
Okay, so...
All right, okay. Someone says, is Southern Israelite part of those weird cult? I don't know what they're talking
they said
about.
no. Apparently, I guess Rambles had said I was actually thinking to tell them of Southern Israelites so they could debate them this weekend. Sadly, J. Dyer won't. Speaking of which, on the last show we talked about talking to RC Apologists, and in fact, we are set up to. We are going to be debate with him from 7 to 9 on Friday. So. Just so you can have that heads up there on Friday. We'll be having a full discussion debate sort of thing with him, talking about various objections to orthodoxy is what I think he wanted to talk to. So we'll see. No, I don't think it's going to be anything formal.
Well, yeah, okay. And there was something I was mentioning before? What was I talking about before you started reading a question?
Hold on.
I don't even remember. It's probably not that important.
Well, I think you were still talking about the question you started reading about the Southern Israelite guy.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I kind of got stuffiness. Okay. All right. So I guess that's good for tonight. There's not much else to discuss.
All right. We'll be back on Wednesday, and then I'm gonna try to see if I can wrap up further discussions with Matt Slick and finish that off once and for all on Thursday, and then Friday we'll be debating RC Apologist.
All right.
We got a full schedule this week. Yay.
Okay. All right. Benedicite.
All right. Benedicite.